Hello?
Dweezil?
Yes.
All right. My name's Mark Thibault. I'm calling from Quebec City.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. You?
Yeah.
Where are you presently?
At the moment, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina.
You're preparing yourself for a show?
Yeah, we have a Halloween concert.
You do anything special when it's on special occasions like that?
The band usually gets pretty festive, and they all wear costumes. I don't like to wear a costume because I can't play properly if I feel like I'm wearing something that I'm not used to.
Okay. It slows you down a bit.
Yeah, but the drummer has done shows where he's wearing like a full face helmet and stuff, like he's a TIE fighter pilot from Star Wars. Like
Okay.
wear a full costume the whole time, which is totally insane. But because we play like a 3-hour show.
Yeah, it gets pretty harsh playing with all that stuff on yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you need all the space possible to play well your techniques.
yeah. Well, it just shows the commitment not only to the music but to Halloween itself.
Yeah. This is your seventh or eighth time, I believe, in Quebec City, right?
I don't remember exactly how many times we've been there, but I'm going to guess that it's been at least 6, so maybe this will be our 7th time.
Okay. I don't know if you know, but I've done some research on the number of times that your father came here, and he's been here 8 times. And
Well, we were, I guess, right on his heels.
yeah, I hope so. I hope you're gonna pass that too.
Yeah.
I was wondering, you've been going on tour for since 2006, representing the music of your father, and at first as Zappa plays Zappa, and then you had to change and go under a few different monikers. I'd like you to, if you can, give us a little history of the evolution of the band since 2006.
Sure. Well, when I originally put the band together, the goal was to have musicians that had never had any affiliation with my dad's band, younger musicians that could learn to play this music and play it commensurate with the way that it was played when my dad was leading his bands.
Okay.
And so I had one version of the band together for probably about 5.5 years or so, and that's about the length of the longest time my dad ever had any single formation of a band together. It's hard to keep a group together for extended periods of time when you have really difficult music. So since I started in 2006, so in about maybe 2011 is when we started to see a lot of changes in different members of the band. But the current lineup that I've put together over the last maybe 2 years is my favorite version of the band, which I wish I would have had since the very beginning.
Mhm.
The thing that's so great about this particular version of the band is that we can cover material from any era and really get into the authentic sound of the different arrangements, because vocally the band has so much more range than it ever had, and instrumentally, musically, the players are the best that I've had in any band. So, we can really tackle anything from the catalog, and that is an exciting thing to be able to do. So this particular tour, we have focused on a lot of stuff that is really hardcore. That's why it's called choice cuts.
Mm-hmm.
We've dug out arrangements from live concerts that were never officially released. So there's material that won't be that familiar to people. But, for example, there'll be a song that might be familiar, like a song like Florentine Pogan,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll be an arrangement that was never released.
Okay.
And so we found the very first performance of the song on a bootleg concert from May of 1974, and we learned the arrangement of the very first time the song was played. And it's a totally different sounding song, but it's really cool, So it's one of these things where it's really interesting to me to see how the song evolved from the first version into what it eventually became when it made it onto an album. And it is pretty drastically different. And I don't really know of any other artist that tweaks the arrangement of their songs so much. You know, my dad, over the years, would do that with a handful of songs. They would constantly be rearranged and sound different. And so we've looked for a few of those and put them into the set. You know, there's a song called Take Me Twilight that we have a different arrangement of. But they're all arrangements that were done by my dad. That's not something that I've just rearranged, you know. So, but it's a really fun show, and it has 33 songs in the set list, so it's about almost 3 hours.
Good God. You must be bushed at the end.
Yep.
Are you trying to keep always the same set list for all the shows, or you try to put a little variation depending on the cities you're going to?
We do mix it up a little bit, but the difficulty with mixing it up is that the sounds that are needed to be used in each song, when you mix up the set list, you have to move where those are located on, you know, your pedal board, and sometimes that just takes up more time than you would like, and so, you know, sometimes I can't mix it up as much as I would want to because it's just extra work I don't have time for while I'm out on the road.
Okay. We can expect something pretty interesting and pretty vintage and fresh at the same time.
Yeah, there'll definitely be things that people will know well, but then there's going to be some very choice cuts in there, things that may become people's new favorite version of songs, because some of these arrangements are really cool. There's one for a song that's called Orange County Lumber Truck.
Yeah.
That has a lot of really cool harmonies, but this particular version of it it's totally different than anything that I've ever heard before, and it's really fast, and it has this really strummy, funky wah-wah guitar happening in the background while the melody is going on, and every time we play it, you know, it just feels so good. It's like, oh, wow, how come this version never came out, you know? It's just such a cool thing, and I love finding stuff like that and being able to play it and
share it.
And, yeah, share it with people.
How many members are there in your band right now?
7.
Okay, and then these are all new musicians that you've I don't like saying the word hired, but that you that are with you, that are playing with you since 2011?
Well, some of them have been around since then, and then a few of them are newer, only been in the band for a couple of years. So it's sort of a hybrid of some veterans, if you want to call it that, and then some new people.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before that you're having trouble keeping them for a long time. Is it too demanding physically?
Well, the problems that my dad had was that sometimes people would want to get in the band just so they could have it as their resume, so they could go on to something else, because the training that you get when you're in the band is unlike anything that you would get anywhere else.
It's almost military.
And so, you know, once people are have gone through it, they feel like, oh, now it's time for my big solo career.
Okay.
And yet there's only a handful of people that did go on to have big solo careers once they were not in my dad's band anymore. So sometimes people, you know, it went to their head in a weird way, and that kind of behavior is the thing that usually is the downfall of a certain kind of band. You know, when people stop paying attention to what their role in the music is and start making the focus be on trying to get attention for themselves within the music, when that's not their job, that's when they get fired.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, my dad had to deal with that. I've had to deal with that, and and that's just kind of over a period of time, some people just start to get delusional.
Yeah.
And they start thinking that they're the reason that everybody is there to see the show, and it's just that at that point it's time for them to go.
Yeah, that's the hard part of your job, right?
Yeah.
December 4th is going to be the 25th anniversary of your father's passing away. Is there anything planned to, I don't like the term celebrate, but to commemorate his passing away?
Well, the crazy thing about it for me is that it always sneaks up on me every year. I never committed that day to memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things that people will ask me, hey, when did your dad pass? I'm like, I couldn't even tell you. Don't know, because it's like one of those things that you kind of just almost block out. At least that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, it's not a celebration for you.
No.
Yeah.
And so, but it is kind of amazing that it's 25 years ago already. It's just a shocker. But, the good thing for me is that when I get to play this music, I have a continuous relationship with my dad through the music.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. But, I don't really have any contact with, the official people that are, running the trust and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
they may have some sort of something planned, but I don't have any idea what that is. I'm not given any information about that.
Okay, so the communication isn't that very good yet.
No, I don't suspect that's going to change anytime soon.
Well, that's I don't want to talk too much about that. It seems like all the interviews I've seen that were done with you, people were putting some emphasis on that, and it's just I feel it's a shame that it's going that way. But there are things that you can't control, right?
Yeah, pretty much, But I mean, I just focus on the music the same as I always have,
Yeah, keep it that way. That's the way we like it.
Yeah.
I have a good friend of mine. You probably know him, the small little Wazoo. You never
The guy that has the little museum
of your father? Yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
He asked me if I had some time to ask you a couple of questions for him, because
Sure.
he's going to be at your show, that's for sure. Are you still planning to release an album? I don't know if that's the correct thing, but he mentioned 35 guitarists you dreamed of working with.
Yeah, it's a record that's called What the Hell Was I Thinking? And I started it back in the 90s, and the best way to describe it is an audio movie. It has all these different scenes that take place. The music changes, and the audio environment changes, and then there's these guest cameo appearances from different guitar players.
Okay.
And there's about 40 different people on it, and there's still more people I want to record. And I have some other things that I want to do with that. But yes, I do plan to release it, but there's still more I'm doing on it, because it's just over time, other things become possible that weren't possible before, audio-wise and even perhaps performance-wise with different people and things. So to me, it's just an ongoing thing until I get it just the way I want it. And it's going to be an interesting thing. I mean, it potentially even has Guinness Book of World Records.
For the most guitarists on the same album.
Yeah, and longest time to make an album.
Oh, yeah, well, you seem to be focused like your father on that. You're not satisfied till you're fully satisfied, right?
Well, in this case, it's just one of these things. Like it started off as an idea of just making a random piece of music that I just took a number. I said I want to make a piece of music that's 22 minutes long, and I wanted to add all these different styles of music within that. And when I did that, it sounded good to me, so I said, you know what, I'm going to try to do something that's all continuous, that all segues together, and everything changes all the time, and it will be the entire length of a CD, which the longest you can make something is 75 minutes. So the piece of music is 75 minutes, but it's constantly morphing, and so one of the main things that I want to be able to do with it is really focus on the sort of sound design of it, so that when it does change, you're really experiencing all these different atmospheres and things. And I'd like to be able to mix it in surround sound. I think that would be the thing that would make it the coolest.
Yeah, it blew our mind away. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
That's good. There's a queer question, but I heard that, well, he told me that Lady Gaga bought your family house.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, I didn't know about it. So if you're saying that's what you heard, so you haven't been there, you haven't met her yet since it's happened.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of his last questions is he was wondering if you were going to play Watermelon in the Easter Hay on the 11th.
I don't know. We haven't played it in a while. We did play it last time we were through. But maybe we have a few songs from Joe's Garage, but a lot of different things in the show.
Okay. That's his favorite. That's why.
Yeah, I love that one too. We'll see.
Okay, that's great. I read a couple of interviews, like I mentioned before, and in one of them, you mentioned that you were supposed to work with a 100-piece orchestral.
Yeah, I did that last year in Holland.
How did it turn out?
It was great. It was a really fun experience. I got to write music of my own. The orchestra also played some of my dad's music and one piece from Steve Vai. So we recorded it, and hopefully I'll be able to put a version of it out at some point. I'm going to plan to do some more of that stuff too, but it's a really fun, cool learning experience as well.
You were alone as guitarist?
Well, I played a little bit of guitar, but the main thing was to write music that was only to be played by the orchestra. So I had about 3 or 4 pieces that I didn't play on, and then I played on, I think it was 3 songs. One of them was Watermelon and Easter Hay, actually. And then we did a version of a song of mine called Truth, and another one from an older record that was called Shampoo Horn.
Yeah. Wasn't that done with your brother Emmett?
He was on that record, yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying you're probably going to release, what's it going to be, a CD, double CD, DVD, or you don't know yet?
Don't know yet. I haven't had time to go through it and
you're a busy man.
Figure out what to do. Yeah.
Oh, well.
But the piece of music that was the longer piece, there's about a 12-minute piece of music that's called The Adventures of Dindu, and that is the piece that was the most fun to hear it come to life.
Well, how much time did you pass there?
Well, it was hard to write this stuff because I would have to do it like just in little moments, when I had free time over a period of several months. So I might have a day here or a couple days there, and having never written music specifically for an orchestra, it's hard to know what it is that you want to do. You have to kind of have some idea in your mind of what it's going to be and how long certain pieces are going to be, and so the way that I ended up writing it was I would just do a little bit at a time, where I would say, okay, I'm going to write 2 minutes of music, and I would start off by on a computer you can just type in some notes. You can have like just a steady stream of 16th notes, and then I just started to arrange them like drawing on the screen, and I built shapes out of them, and those shapes end up being ascending or descending scales and things, and then I could get a feel for certain melodic passages and say, okay, I like this, and I would just arrange it how I wanted, and then I would write parts around that. But it was a great way to be able to always be able to write something, because sometimes, if you have to try to wait for inspiration for something, you may not get anything done, so this way at least, it's like you can react to something. You're like, okay, well, here's a starting point. Oh, let me do something with this. And that was the way that I got through it. And it turned out to be a really cool piece of music that if I would have attempted to write it just all with a guitar, it wouldn't have been anything close to what it was. In fact, I didn't write a single note of that piece of music with a guitar in my hands.
Okay, it was all done on computer.
Yep.
It must be pretty complicated to try to figure out how you're going to be able to make all the instruments, fit in.
Well, that becomes the big challenge. An orchestra kind of already balances itself out based on the frequency range of the instruments, but intensity is another thing. And so the challenge of writing certain things that you want to sound as big as you can make them, some of those kind of instruments, the brass, is always going to be louder than even a big string section. So when you want to be able to hear all the parts acoustically in the room, it becomes a challenge to have certain players play at certain volumes and others play at a lower volume. You end up needing some kind of sound reinforcement so that the whole performance can be done in a way where the power of what you're trying to bring across comes across. So, but that was something that I learned a lot about. Because there's a difference when you're doing it with a computer and you listen to it. You can use mixing faders and balance the sound how you want to hear it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to sound when actual people play it, So there's a lot to learn about that process. And having gone through it once, now I know what kind of stuff will translate better and can write things, to take advantage of the strengths of the orchestra.
When I read the article where you spoke about what you just described to me, it made me think of your father a lot. Like, it seemed like all the songs that he used to write, they seemed so complicated because of all the sounds and all the instruments that he brings in. And yet, when I hear you talk about it, it almost sounds like if he was working the same way that you are.
Well, I definitely saw how he worked and what he was working on, and I always was interested in asking questions, and so you're right about what he did. Essentially, he was a composer, and if he was using a rock band, he would use them like an orchestra. So that goes back to the stuff we were talking about with musicians in the band. The music, when you're composing that way, everybody has a particular role, and you have to do the part that you have been assigned, and you have to play it correctly, and you have to do what the composer wants done. And, when everybody has the right mentality, and you're all part of a team that's putting this puzzle together and playing it, it's a great sensation. It's a really fun thing to do, but it can be thrown out of whack when somebody decides that they want to alter their part to bring attention to themselves, and that's when the music suffers because somebody else thinks that they're going to bring something to it that wasn't asked for, and so that's the kind of stuff that was always the challenge for my dad with writing the music that he did. Is he wanted people to play the parts that were written, and so even a guy like George Duke, there's interviews you can see him where sometimes my dad would ask him to play something really basic, really simple, like just some simple triads, and because George was capable of doing so much more, he would be like, "Oh man, I can't do that. That's just, And my dad said, "What is it beneath you?" And George learned a lesson from it because he was like, it's about what's required for the music, and like doing the thing that is there for that specific reason, and then he had a real different approach to stuff, and he really adopted that same mindset, and so many great things happened as a result.
Mm-hmm. We know you can do it, but that's not what we want you to do.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where the arrangement works because it's everything is in balance, and the moment you start putting too much of something else, it throws off the balance of the rest of the stuff. So my dad really was thinking about his music in terms of it being an orchestral arrangement. He obviously worked with actual orchestras, but the rock band arrangements of stuff are essentially orchestral arrangements. I mean, you would take the same parts and give those to an orchestra, and that's how the song would be played. So it's pretty unusual to have somebody that had that skill set, who could write all that stuff and arrange and orchestrate it as well. A quick story, there was a great musician that played in my dad's band for years, Ruth Underwood, played marimba and percussion, and she did not like to improvise, and my dad was always trying to get her to improvise, but she would not solo. She just felt uncomfortable doing it. So one time, after trying again to convince her to do an improvisational thing, and she said, "No, I just really can't do it," my dad, at a sound check, stood there with a piece of music paper and a pen, and he wrote a melody, just standing right in front of her, and said, "Okay, well then tonight you're going to play this." And he wrote this melody, and the melody is one of the most amazing melodies. It's the melody from the song Dweezil. But if you think about that song and you listen to it, and then you think, well, wait a minute, that was like a stream of consciousness melody that he wrote standing in front of her for like 5 minutes, and said, well, you're going to play this. And then the funny thing about it is the way it's arranged, she has to play on her own. So essentially she's playing a solo.
So he improvised for her, and then she had to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice anecdote.
Yep.
I've seen that you've done some clinics or boot camps before the shows. Do you plan on doing that also here in Quebec City?
I have to check on my schedule. I'm not sure if it's scheduled for that, but I do have some on my schedule. I just don't know, because I don't have it in front of me, which cities I'm doing them in, because they're not in every city. But people could find out from my website, dweezilzappa.com.
Okay. Right. I was also interested in one of the interviews that you did. You mentioned What's in a Name question and answer tour that you did in the States a couple of years ago.
Uh-huh.
That'd be something nice that you could do before instead of a boot camp before the shows. You could invite, let's say, people, VIPs or something like that, and just have a beer and chat over the Q&A. What's in the name, and that'd be nice.
Might be a good idea. Maybe we'll try it out sometime.
You never know. I know I'd buy the ticket if you sold one of those. In another interview, you mentioned the song that you wrote with your father, Dragon Master.
Uh-huh.
You think you could talk to us a little bit about that song, and if we might hear it at some time in one of your shows?
We've played it a few times on tour. It's a song that my dad was joking around with in the late 80s. He wrote these lyrics that are like the quintessential heavy metal song, and the lyrics are pretty far-fetched and hilarious if you just read them as is, but if you put them in a heavy metal context, heavy metal fans hear it, and it brings songs about like, these bold images of, the dragon master being awoken and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, for a heavy metal fan, this is like legit lyric writing.
Yeah.
So it operates on two levels where it's like, if you're a heavy metal fan, this is like, this is a bitchin' metal song. If you just are, hearing it and you don't know that much about metal, you'll hear a lot more jokes in it. But the music, my dad wrote the lyrics, and he said, I want you to write the music for this. And I did do a version of it a long time ago, but I never released the version that I had put together before. But when I was making my Via Zamata record, I wanted to add in a little bit of an Arabic sound. So I did an intro where I was playing an instrument called the oud, and it really set up this ominous awakening of the dragon, and then and then it gets real, like almost Black Sabbath.
Almost dark.
Darkness.
Yeah. So okay, so maybe we'll hear it, maybe not. You don't know yet.
I don't know, but we have played it probably, I don't know, 30, 40 times.
That much?
Throughout, yeah.
Okay.
But at the moment, we haven't been playing it.
Okay. And I was also wondering, with all the concerts that you do you put in once in a while one of your songs, or more than one?
Yeah, we do. It just really depends on my mood, In this particular show, I haven't been, but there are definitely songs of mine that I have thrown in on recent tours, stuff from my Via Zamata record and stuff from earlier records as well. It just always depends on, what I feel like bringing back. I just released digitally one of my older records, just came out again today, Confessions of a Deprived Youth.
Okay.
And that one, we might learn some stuff from that on a future tour.
Okay. I was thinking that maybe someday you could do, let's say, maybe not a whole first part, but something like an intro with some of your songs, some of your. I want to say biggest hits, because I like most of your albums, most of the songs of your albums. So
yeah,
maybe let's say 5 or 6 songs that you could start the show with, and then go on with your father's work.
Yeah, there's definitely different possibilities. I'm gonna look into learning more stuff. It just always comes down to like time for rehearsal and budgeting and all that kind of stuff.
You're so busy that it's going to be when you're going to have some time somewhere, right?
Pretty much.
I also read in one of your other interviews that somebody mentioned that maybe you could write a book, and you didn't seem too enthusiastic about that. Why is that?
Well, at the time, it didn't seem to be so much, like when people write books, sometimes it's like I don't know what the motivation is for people to say, oh, I got to write a book of my life story. It doesn't always. For me, if I think about my life, I'm like, who wants to read about that? But there have been a few little things that have, happened that, it might be worth sharing some stories, but also some things that people don't really know about, that are challenging things that I've had to deal with or overcome, and so now the idea is a little bit more appealing than it was maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, because I got the book, the real Frank Zappa book, written by your father, and with the help of Peter. I hope I pronounced this right. Occhio Grosso.
Yep.
It's a pretty good book. Made me laugh a lot.
Yeah, it's a hilarious book.
Yeah, well, I thought that when I read the interview that you had, and when you mentioned that you weren't too enthusiastic, yeah, I thought about this book, and it'd be nice if you wrote a book like that, with full of anecdotes and the how could I say that, the sunny side of of Dweezil Zappa.
Well, I mean, I do have, some stories that are probably would be entertaining. One of the things. Remember, you were talking about that "What's in a Name"
Yep.
tour. That was that's like the equivalent of a book in a way. It's like telling a bunch of stories, and people came to it and enjoyed it, and it was fun to do.
Because they relate to it.
Yeah, so that sort of also was a helpful thing to see that, that maybe there's people that would be entertained by that. But, when you have to think about, like, sitting down and writing all this stuff and, like, well, who wants this, Like, it's not, like, I don't think of it in terms of, like, wow, my life is so important, everybody must know.
Yeah, well, that's what your father writes at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Well, it shows you have the same kind of thinking, which is good. So it means if you do one, it would be pretty interesting. We'd probably laugh a lot too.
Well, good. I'll start thinking about when I can find some time to do it then.
Well, I guess I've been almost all around with my questions. Maybe a couple more questions, maybe more anecdotic ones. I found out that, well, you cite Steve Vai and Eddie Van Halen as influences, and you also mentioned somewhere that Eddie Van Halen produced your first single when you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
Now, what was that?
It was called "My Mother is a Space Cadet," and I'd only been playing guitar for about 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
So what was cool about it, I mean, obviously, like having Eddie Van Halen as the guy helping you get the sounds and get the performances in the studio at 12 years old, and he's the most popular guitar player in the world.
He's like God in front of you.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. But I got to learn a lot of things about the studio where, at the time, everything was all done with analog tape machines. Mm-hmm. And so there's a process to overdubbing where you have to learn to play along with what you already played. And then if you want to fix something or improve something, you just keep playing, and the engineer will press play and record, and you jump in on the part that you want to fix. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know anything about any of that stuff, so he had to explain the process of overdubbing, and so I got to learn a lot of cool things at 12 years old about making records and doing that, with Edward Van Halen as the teacher. So that was cool.
Yeah, I bet. There must be lots of people that would have dreamed of that. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. If you knew, your father has lots of things in connection with our province here in Quebec. I don't know if you knew that he played a solo on an album of one of our French Quebecers, pioneers in the 70s. Did you know that?
I heard about it, but I don't think I've actually ever heard the track. Somebody was telling me about this, and I forgot the name of the artist.
The artist's name is Robert Charlebois, and the album is called Swing Charlebois Swing. It was made in 1977. The song's called Petroleum.
Called Petroleum?
Yeah, if you want to check it out. It's the last song on the album. It's the 10th song on the album. It's pretty good. Right. And you can hear his influence. It's funny, though. You think, well, any guitarist can come in and play and sound like him. No. Once you know it's Frank Zappa playing, you can hear that. Oh, there's the twang and the little things that make him so special. So
check it out as soon as we get off the phone.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing, you're going to be here in Quebec City on November 11th. On November 11th, 1976, your father was here at the Coliseum. That's 42 years ago, date to date.
Wow. Well, that's cool.
So yeah, I did a couple of research. That's why I was asking you for the number of times you came here. Like I told you before, your father came here. The last time he came here was in '84. Never came back afterwards, unfortunately. But if you can make it last for another 10 or 15 years, if you're healthy enough to tough the road, you
Yeah.
should be. You look like someone who tries to stay in shape, so it's gonna be good.
Yep, that's my. It's always been, a good priority for me. So.
Well, that's great. You said you were in Nashville, right?
Yep.
How many other shows do you have before coming here?
Well, we pretty much have a show every day for the next week, so at least
Okay.
7 more shows before we get up there.
So that means you do a show, you travel during the night?
Yep,
Jeez. In bus or plane?
in a bus.
In bus. Okay.
Yep.
And then you come, once you arrive, you got to do your and the sound checks and
Yeah, and the interviews and
yeah.
all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. When it's not on phone, it's at the radios or. Well,
Yeah, something.
so at least here in Quebec City, you can say that the interview is already going to be done. So you've saved
Yeah.
some time for you.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Well, I appreciate a lot the time that you gave us. I hope you're gonna have a good gig tonight, and I hope you're gonna
Yeah.
come here in good health and good shape. And we're waiting for you here with how could I say that? I'm more French than English, and sometimes I'm having trouble with my emotions and my words. But we can't wait to see you here. That's for sure.
Well, we're excited to come back. We'll see everybody real soon. Hope they come out and enjoy the show.
Yeah. So this is I want to thank you from the CKIA station here in Quebec City, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much.